Welcome back to the ASUG News Studio. I'm Tom Whalger from ASUG News. Delighted to have two BI consultants who are well-known in the industry in the studio. On my stream right over there, you have Dallas Marks, BI consultant for Calvin Consultant. And we have Jay Riddle from JWR Consulting. I wonder what that stands for.
I don't know. Now changed to Comerit. I was lured back in.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you here, and thank you guys a lot. So what we're going to first talk about SAP HANA, right?
Absolutely.
No. We're going to go into BI. How much you love SAP HANA. We're going to start with BI4. So much has happened this past year. I don't know if you caught Steve Lucas's keynote yesterday. It was interesting, talking about a little bit premature with the launch in February. But now that it's here, you guys are out in the industry talking to clients, working with clients. Jay, maybe we'll start with you. What are you hearing? It's been the kind of approach. Well, actually, maybe you could talk a little about the clients' environments you've been working on, predominantly, and then talk about how they're approaching, because I know there are some contrasting differences in both of your kind of client sets who you're working with.
Sure. So I've been doing a number of installations, starting with Ramp Up in January, and that was interesting, working alongside with these SAP Ramp Up coaches and to see that whole process in play. And actually right here in Orlando was a large enterprise customer, and we deployed completely virtualized production environment with well over 20 servers across from sandbox to production. So it was a pretty big deal. This was we're going to 4.0, brand new BusinessObjects customer, but SAP customer.
They were an SAP. Interesting. So they were buying in it. They made their decision. We're just going to go for it.
They're drinking the Kool-Aid. They're all in.
Did they make? What kind of pushed them over the edge? Do you know, why they? I mean, there are lots of options out there. They could have just stuck with the status quo. What they have. What do you think sold them on that?
I think at the end of the day, I think that there were expectations set for the business. With some very steep timelines, and they wanted to deliver some very innovative dashboards.
Okay.
And and it was one of those things where really it could have been achieved in 3.1. They were well set up and ready to go to 3.1 initially, and ultimately they made a decision that new BI consumer service, that direct connectivity to SAP, was going to cut down a lot of time and additional development for them.
Interesting. So they were a ramp-up customer all the way through. So they got to see.
That's correct. They were one of the original ramp-up customers before they opened it up to wide open ramp-up in the summer, and they are live today with production dashboards, and they're working very well using the new BI web services and a lot of the new web caching features. So.
Okay, Interesting, Dallas. So your experience maybe more with pure BusinessObjects customers, and how are they approaching it? What you've seen?
So Calvin is based in the Midwest, and so I think customers in the Midwest tend to be more conservative about everything, and BI4 is certainly something that I think they're taking a little bit more cautiously.
Okay.
Our most optimistic BI4 advocates are pretty much SAP customers, and it just makes a whole lot of sense. And a lot of these customers are adopting BusinessObjects for the first time, so it's just a very logical move. A customer who has a legacy investment in a prior version of BusinessObjects, they're not necessarily opposed to BI4. It's just there's a lot more planning that has to go into it. So, for example, a legacy customer might have a bunch of desktop intelligence documents, and so they have to reconcile what are we going to do about that. And even in something as simple as BI4 being a truly 64-bit platform, many sites they're on 32-bit hardware. So budgeting for hardware now becomes part of the upgrade process, and sometimes that takes a while.
Do you think a lot of customers are thinking, okay, get to BI4 and then we'll sit on that for a long time. Maybe that's the move, and we'll just use this for a long time. Or you think this is going to be we're going to get BI4 and just keep going with all the releases and all the upgrades, and because they're excited about this? Or do you think what's going to happen there?
Well, to me, I think it's a big consultant answer. It depends, right? So, it really sometimes it could waver. If I've gone in there and an executive has been sold on a very attractive dashboard or something that's going to require integration or a feature that's in 4.0,
sure.
Well, that's pretty much sold it. So that's going to go or no go, regardless of how dirty it may get. We have to get there. We'll get through it,
Okay.
But then at the other hand, there are folks that really I think are just struggling to find the ultimate measure that's going to say, this is why we're going to go, and how do we make this a win, for the business. So it's a number of different things.
Right.
But also, what I find kind of interesting is, prior to last week, we all knew that 4.1 was coming next year, and now there's been some repositioning, and so now we know that Feature Pack 3 of 4.0 is coming next year. So I think SAP is trying to make people more comfortable adopting the 4.0 release by not changing that second number.
Making people more comfortable, or kind of forcing their hand a little bit?
I don't think really forcing their hand. More comfort, because if they were trying to force their hand, for example, you wouldn't be able to use the iPad with XI 3.1, but you can. And so I think SAP is trying to do the best job that they can of both approaches. 4.0 is clearly the future, and it's clearly got some really great enhancements to it, but at the same time recognizing that customers are still on 3.1 and still making some modest improvements. And I think their commitment to mobility on XI 3.1 is probably the best example of that.
Okay. We've also always talked about the classic IT business users disconnect. When it comes to this, who are they SAP selling to more? Is it the IT people and all these cool things, or is it purely going after business people and showing all these great new things we can do, and then it's IT's issue to fix it, and then you guys get called in to do your stuff?
I really think that at the end of the day, whether it's IT making the decision or the business making the decision, I think the commonality between the message is really self-service and this interoperability introduced, right? So the big piece was obviously for SAP customers, the integration, right?
Okay.
This is the map. This is going to give you the best integration outside of the other product suites that are available on the market to connect to SAP. I think when you move beyond that, though, it really becomes about user adoptability, and these tools are going to introduce that at a quicker rate and give you a quicker ROI. So that's attractive for the IT, because they can have some manageability around that. Okay, it's more flexibility with the tools and more seamlessness, but also the business can then also achieve that self-service.
Right. What about usability with 4.0? How about training? I had some guy here earlier talking about training from T-Mobile. He was great.
Nick,
Nick Strauss.
Great, just came from a session. Doing
it on their own. Is there a lot of training going to be involved in this, or users? Is the UI going to be so good that not as much as typical for a big SAP?
That's something I think that I've been really focused on in this conference. These conferences have such intense and deep content here. That's what's so great about this event. And I've been really experiencing a lot of requests from customers who are going to BI4 that really want to ensure that it's successful, that user adoption is successful. So training is a big anxiety right now for businesses, but they're willing to invest, I think, in that time and effort. And I think we're starting to see SAP really deliver some road mapping and some clear messaging around the education offerings that are going to be available, and really how to provide a feedback loop so that that training is sustainable moving forward.
Yep.
So I'm an authorized trainer, so SAP actually sent me 35 pounds of training manuals last week, so I'm starting to go through those. I think administrators...
So the big training manuals still exist, huh?
Well, they exist for instructors.
Okay.
There is actually...
That's actually how he works out. He lugs those things around out in the backyard.
So the classroom training is moving to electronic training materials.
Okay.
Calvin's an on-site training partner, so we go out to customer locations. And for right now, it's going to be the customer's choice. Do we want paper manuals or do we want electronic? But that move is underfoot. But administrators, I think, are going to be very comfortable moving to BI because the tools are very familiar. There are new features, but not necessarily in an overwhelming way. The semantic layer, there's now two ways. There's the classic universe semantic layer, but now there's also the new information design tool.
Sure.
But it's optional. And probably the biggest concern that I have is how customers are going to react to Web Intelligence 4.0, because it's sort of like the difference between Office 2010 and prior versions.
Okay.
It's a pretty big change, and that's the main business user tool. So that's where I have a little bit of concern, and we'll just see how it plays out.
Great. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's really interesting. It falls back to that. It depends. For customers that have already been using the tool sets, we see that there is that drastic change. It's going to be something that needs to be taken into consideration when putting together training. But then you have other scenarios where you have folks that are on the SAP side, okay, that are BEX users, okay, and actually the analysis tool is kind of, I find, in the middle. I just did a usability test, and you can tell they're trying to, I think, ease in. So there's some visual things that are obviously seamless across web intelligence, very similar in analysis to the BusinessObjects look and feel, but they still keep certain terminology like key figures, characteristics, instead of dimensions or measures. I know eventually they may ease that in, but I think they're trying to cater to both sides in that tool.
And then, of course, there's Explorer. So Explorer puts essentially a Google interface on top of your BI environment. I think that's very successful. And sometimes I'll hear from IT people, oh, but it's missing features. But to me, if you add the wrong features to Explorer, it then begins to require training, and it currently doesn't. So I think they very carefully guarded maintaining the ease of use, and of course, that was the first foray into mobile for SAP, was with the Explorer application.
Great. Last question, and then I will let you guys get back to your sessions. Is the terminology around, we hear BI, BI4, business analytics is obviously, does that matter in the end? Is it just giving users the capabilities that they need, no matter we call it BI or business analytics? Because it seems like SAP is making the push to everything's now going business analytics, and you've written about, is the BusinessObjects brand going to be around any longer?
Sure.
Does it matter in the end, or is it just about the technology and what users can get?
It's both things. I think it does matter. I haven't done an exhaustive search at this conference, but at Sapphire earlier this year, in the business analytics area, there was only one sign that said BusinessObjects. Everything else said either SAP or Business Analytics. But when you go, the customers that I work with, your users in the accounting department, what do you log into? I log into the BusinessObjects system. That's what they call it.
Right.
And business users don't live and breathe the buzzwords the same way that consultants or even the IT department does. So name changes can be very confusing to them. So
yeah, I think we have to be careful. I think that if we are using these different terms, we at least need to have some clear and consistent messaging around the difference between analytics, okay, and BI, okay, as a platform, because we can't forget, we still have CRISP reports, we have canned and operational reporting, we have a myriad of different tools within the suite, and to encompass all of that as analytics is, I think you start heading in the wrong direction, where you're going to start losing that messaging about different tool for different job.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming by. I appreciate it. It was very interesting.
Thank
you, Tom.
All right, next up, we've got Scott Lever and Blair Whedon coming in from SAP, so come back in about 15 minutes. Thank you.